Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, welcome back to the Investigative Journal. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, the only thing I require in this show is that you have to show your birth certificate. And if you tell me you're a girl and you got a birth certificate as a boy, then you can't listen. Anyway, this is Greg Anthony here. Let me tell you what I'm doing. If you can't see me, everybody wants to see everybody. That's why we have YouTube, right? I don't like it, but radio's still important. Well, let me explain where I'm at. I'm sitting at my desk with a microphone near my mouth and with more brains than a person deserves to have, but doesn't use it well all the time. But yes, you're listening to Excellence in Jesuit Broadcasting. That's what it is. EJB. I'm just copying Excellence in Broad, EIB. Well, who's EIB? That's Rush Limbaugh. This is EJB, Excellence in Jesuit Broadcasting. Because we're the only channel outside of a few people out there. I know there's one guy in Germany. There's a couple more here. But they're all prescribing to these values of Christianity and these values of religion. We don't do it here. There's a separation of church and state. We do it specifically to save your ass from these people who will cut your head off. And they don't care if you're a Christian, Muslim, or whatever you are. So anyway, the EJB, Excellence in Jesuit Broadcasting, right here on the Investigative Journal. All right. Where have you been, Greg, for all these shows? I have a weekly show. Well, I have a daily show, but it's turning into a weekly show because I've been so damn busy that I can't really keep up with it, but I am going to try. Listen, there's two phases of life. It's reality, and then it's broadcasting, which really should be a reality because if you're a broadcaster, you should get paid for it, but I do it kind of now as a hobby. There were days, years in my life that I get paid for this beautiful voice and this excellent brain to explain to you the most difficult things in the world. And boy, I'll tell you, some people came out and paid for it. Yes, there were many friends, there were many people, there were many generous people through the years that kept this show going. And I thank each and every one of them. But as it is today, with about 1 million radio broadcasters out there, and I'm not saying the First Amendment doesn't allow that, but many of them are misled. I don't see anybody really pushing the button towards getting the Jesuits to confess that they're an evil organization designed to overthrow this country using the Muslim religion, which they, the Vatican, have created to basically take care of all of us. So if you want to continue listening, throw in a few bucks at gregbeacon@gmail.com. You can go to, that'll go to PayPal, and you know what? We may be able to stop doing all this crazy legal work I have to do. Oh, let me tell you, let's spend a minute telling you what happens to your mind when you do legal work for more than 40 hours in a week, and you do it consistently for 3 months. You turn into a maniac, crazed. You turn into somebody who wants to just run out into the ocean and go, oh my God, just let me swim, because I'm dying here in all these legalese words. And you know, the funny thing is, if you give a judge something interesting to read, he won't do it. For example, I wrote a motion for an attorney, and this is very funny, but nobody read it. And in the middle of the motion, I put a story in there that nobody had nothing to do with the motion. And it really went to the court, and the motion was okay, and everybody did everything. And then about a month after that, somebody said, "Did you read the 2 pages in that motion? It said some story about some dog that turned into this person, or the person turned into a dog, and he was a Buddhist, and nobody knew it." And somebody called me on it and said, "You wrote that motion for me. What happened?" I said, "Oh my God, I was working on one of my great novels, and I guess that got into the motion by accident." But nobody read it. So it proved my point that these judges don't read this stuff. They know what's coming. They've already got their mind made up. And that's the end of the story. And that only happened once in my lifetime, and I've written thousands of law and motions for attorney fees, motions to oppose this and that, motions to reply to motions, and motions that don't even know where the motion's going. So it's a crazy world. And so I've been involved in that just to keep my head above water. And the first thing I want to do after I do them is jump in the ocean and dunk my head in the water. As I said, I need to get clean here. This stuff is killing me. But anyway, I'm not going to digress. Okay, what's this show about today? I'm going to start out with a story you won't believe, and it's going to progress to what this show is really about. But someone sent me a story, one of my old friends from Italy, regarding the small Italian town that was putting on black coverings over crosses in a cemetery because they did not want to offend the Muslim population that's moved into Italy. And I started thinking, my goodness, that seems weird. Even when I was in Italy in the 80s, it was a completely Catholic country. I don't even remember having a discussion. You know, you go into Rome, and you're going to meet Hindus. I met many Muslims. I met many atheists, everyone, and no one was even worried about this. But you see, that's before the agenda took place. And what is the agenda? That is really now to destroy Western Europe and America as it is. And so you would wonder why the Vatican doesn't really give a shit about this. And the reason is the Vatican created Islam. Now, when I say that, I don't say it tongue-in-cheek. If we want to do a show on it, I'd love to. In fact, years ago, when I had more of my excellent brain working than I do today, I encouraged many people to sit with me and do that. And man, no one wants to deal with it. Because then you got to deal with atheists and Satanists and all this stuff no one really wants to talk about. But if I could say something really quickly, today, fast forward to today, everything that we were talking about 15, 20 years ago is coming to be exactly like we said it was. And that doesn't mean I'm a genius. It just means that I have an excellence in broadcasting ability far, far above many of the mainstream people that are making millions and millions of dollars at this. And so even with my brain not as strong as it used to be, it's no match for any of these people, because they have only one thing on their mind: propaganda. Their brain doesn't work. It works like a light bulb that's just about to burn out, because all they've been doing is been getting power from somebody that isn't themselves. And here on this show, we get power from within. Power from within our own selves that have researched things and said, no, let's discuss this. The discussions never happen, and they never will. Because when you have an organization like we're going to talk about today, you can expect only this: chaos, disorder, and a socialist world that will crumble any type of capitalist world, because you know what they'll do? They'll just move capitalism over to China for a while, you know? And God, what kind of capitalism? That's a fascist kind of capitalism over there they have going now. Basically, China is a fascist capitalist state, right? They're dealing with all of our, secrets and all of our capitalist ideas, but they're holding Muslims, they're holding Christians in concentration camps that we don't even care about. So that's basically the best of what could happen here. And isn't it interesting that all of our politicians claim Russia as the enemy when it's really China? You know why? Because China has a lot of money, and they want to move all that over here. Yes, they want to move all of that over here. So we have to talk. Let me lead into this, because I want to talk about this story, which is going to lead into what I'm going to talk about regarding Islam and really what that religion created by the Vatican is all about. Now, this article was sent to me by Leo. You know who Leo is. He's a friend of mine from years ago who has connections to the dark side. But that doesn't mean we can't listen. And I've always enjoyed conversations with him. Now, the Il Giornale, it's a newspaper there, I know it well, I used to read it all the time, reported last week in Italy that a small Italian town has taken to covering crucifixes, that's crosses, in the local cemetery and chapel, apparently so as not to offend people of other faiths, including Muslims. Of course, political outrage has followed this Satanist gesture. But will this be enough? It's a town called Pieve di Centro. It's a town of about 7,000 left-wing liberals that live there, according to Leo here, located just north of Bologna. Not my favorite area. I enjoyed southern Italy, but northern Italy is pretty nice too. And the surrounding region is full of atheists and a growing number of Satanists, as well as Muslims. The two faiths seem to go hand in hand these days, he says. And it's pretty true. Really what's happening here is that this is an old-time war that the Vatican created that's happening right before our very eyes again. But locals there were surprised. You got the people that they're not interested in this. They just live there, unfortunately. They were surprised when they saw someone at the cemetery in this town erect black sheets to hide crucifixes on the graves. The sheets went up as part of renovations at the chapel in case any workers of different faiths were offended. All right, let's get this straight. So now you got workers going to renovate the chapel, and they put up these black things over the crosses so they weren't offended? Inside the chapel itself, blackout curtains on motorized rails obscure the crosses when work is being carried out. An Italian conservative and Catholic politicians were quick to denounce the move, even if Pope Francis and the Catholic Church are on the other side. Yeah, they said, do that. We don't want to offend them. And although it's unclear who exactly gave the order to cover the religious symbols, well, no one's going to tell you. I'm saying it came right from the horse's mouth. Leftist politics dominates Bologna, and the city is nicknamed La Rosa, the Red One, partly because of its historical association with communism, now in a strong alliance with Pope Francis' Catholic Communist Church. And that's exactly what it is. Now, despite the long-standing prevalence of Catholicism in Italy, it seems, you see, let me explain something to you. When I was there in the 80s, I lived in a communist town, but all the people there were Catholic. And communism had its separation of power. There was no infiltration. There was no, oh, if you're a communist, you can't be a Catholic. No, this was an Italian form of communism, which really meant this. It was a system in that little town that really only appeased the senses of a lot of people. That means, let's try to help people. But in a sense, it was no different than the Christian Democrat town that was right next door. So, as I'm saying, people were allowed to speak their views, but really, they had no effect on, silencing a Catholic from coming through town with the cross displayed when someone died, and processions for all of their church activities. So there was no censorship. But now things are changing a bit in Italy, I hear, at least in certain towns. And it seems some of the culture there now may be succumbing to anti-Christian political correctness, as it's happening here in America, as a Catholic cemetery near Bologna has selected to cover its crosses on the graves to avoid offending those who may practice other religions. And I was thinking of this, and I said to myself, what did I say to myself? I said, could they be Satanists? I don't want to see the cross, like you see in all these horror movies. Oh my God, no. Cover the cross. All these workers are going to burn to death, right? Because when they look at the cross, they're going to go, oh, Jesus is here. We can't have that. Sadly, all these icons that were once a mainstay, who cares? Guy wants to put up a cross, guy wants to put up this, that. Doesn't offend me. You put up whatever you want. But now, these anti-Christian policies and left-wing politicians and their demented followers are allowing this to happen. And the end of the story says, don't let this happen in the United States. Beware. Communists love Islam. And so do the Jesuits, who created communism. And it's happening in the United States. And that's our next segue into why it's happening here. We hear it every day now. We have a couple, sympathetic, we have a whole bunch of sympathetic people in America now that are bowing down to all of this political correctness. And it seems even left-wing, journalists follow right along suit. And right-wing journalists are really no different. Let me explain. Let's talk about the recent activities of one of our only Muslim congresswomen, a woman of color. And apparently what that means is anything she says, you criticize her, you can't do it because she's a Muslim and she's a woman of color. Now, to me, that makes absolutely no sense. Now, how about this? If I say radical Islam is what Islam really is, and the idea that Islam was created by the Vatican to destabilize countries back in the old days and today, and now together they're playing this game on us. And I'm a white Polish man. Hey, you can do what the hell you want with me. But I'm going to say this to our representative in Congress. Don't use identity of politics against me because I'm using my identity as a victim. My whole family was victimized by Hitler in the war. That's what they do. They use their identity, create themselves as a victim so that anything that they say, or in a sense what I'm saying now, can't be criticized. Instead of allowing criticism by saying, this is my view, it has nothing to do with what I look like, who I am. And then let's discuss it. That's not happening. And this is not just Omar, this is the representative. This is not her. This is going on the right wing as well with the Trump organization, who now fight back, and the whole thing is just a Jesuit plot. And what I mean by that is they're creating one group to fight against the other, and in the end, they will get the synthesis that they want. And that is a very simple one. And we've said it a million times on this show: a one world government, a one world order, where there is no dissent, there is no criticism, there is no constitution, and basically you're going to be left out in the cold going, oh wow, what happened? That's what's going on. So, with that in mind, in the second half hour, what I want to do is go back to a book written by Dr. Peter Hammond, which I've talked about many times years ago, but it needs to be discussed again, to discuss exactly the statistics behind what happens when a country begins to accept Islam as a peaceful religion when in fact it's radical and it's dangerous, and how it depends on how many Muslims you let in here. Now, in America, here's the real interesting thing. We don't really know. If you look at the Pew Research statistics about how many Muslims are in this country, they say something like 0.8, 1%. They don't know. We got 20 to 30, 40 million illegals in this country. Do we even know who they are? No. Do we know how many they are radical Islamics? No. We can't put a figure on it because we let everybody come in here. And so in the past we documented certain radical groups that have been allowed to function in this country under the nose of the FBI. And there's at least 20 to 30 of these groups that even have little hostels set up, like they got 20 acres up in New York, they got 30 acres in Minnesota, and they're actually running around going, "Death to America," holding their guns and marching, not allowing people in. And when we questioned, or a couple journalists questioned the FBI, why, if they're radical and they're contesting, and saying "Death to America," why don't you kick them out of the country? And they go, "Well, we're observing them." Oh, the hell they are. They're being allowed to stay here for a reason. And then we get even a little deeper. Why did Bill Clinton, why did Barack Obama, why does Donald Trump, and they're all the same, George Bush, allow a guy by the name of Fethullah Gulen, a radical Islamist, to live like a king in the Pocono Mountains, spreading this all over the world, all over America, under our noses? Because that is what they want in the future. It's the downfall. And Trump is a part of it too, because he's had a chance to get rid of Fethullah Gulen. And look up Fethullah Gulen. I've done numerous shows on it. And if he was serious about correcting the problem of 9/11, whatever their game is, and we know that was an inside job and not the truth, then Gulen would have been gone, 9/11 wouldn't have happened. But it's moving very, very quickly. And thank God this half hour is over, and thank God when this country turns into what I'm sure it will in the next 30 or 40, 50 years, I won't be here. Because, man, it's not going to be a pretty place to live. And you think about that, because that's how fast this is moving. And in their time, it's generational. One generation pushes it to the next to the next. And pretty soon you're going to have that one world order, one world religion, like we've talked about for the better part of 20 years here. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today. so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, back, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, you're back to the big top of radio shows. The best place you could ever go in your life if you really want to get out of that real Hegelian dialectic press that we've created. Man, they're smart people, but they just look at things like they have blinders on, like a horse running a race, and that's all they do. It doesn't matter if you're Mark Levin, if you're Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Bill O'Reilly on the right, or whether you're Matthews and the whole bunch there on Wolf Blitzer. What a name. Is that his real name? I doubt it. On the left, they're all the same. They wear blinkers and only look at it from that point of view. They don't delve into the real secrets and the real truth behind how history is rewritten, how people are blinded by television and the screen that they put up in front of you. That's what we do here. We break that. It's like waking up one day and taking a rock and throwing it at your television and saying, screw you. Okay, before I get into how Islam and the Vatican take over countries, and you notice how I put them together, let's discuss 3 important things. One, we're pretty close to the first Saturday in May, which to me is one of the greatest days of sports. And people are going to start going, oh, you like racing. Yes, I like racing. And the reason I do is because many of those horses were born to run. And so that's the Kentucky Derby. It's a favorite day of mine. And I only say that because I trained and rode racehorses a good portion of my life when I was younger and a little lighter at the waistline. Yeah, I remember I used to weigh like 130 pounds on a 5'9" frame, which isn't bad. Now I don't even want to look I don't really want to look at what I weigh, but it's a little bit more than that. So every time I consider this time of year, I start really smelling the roses at the Kentucky Derby. So don't miss it. It's the first Saturday in May. Great 2 minutes in sports. And I just start checking the horses out now. And I always place a bet on that day, so I'm going to do that. I got a casino right near where I live, so I'm going to run over there. And I start checking the horses out about 2 weeks before. And I remember once I said, if I don't become a lawyer, if I don't do that, I'm going to become a horse bettor. Yes. Or what do they really call it? You know, someone who handicaps races. Oh, it's fun. I used to do it even behind the barn. My favorite part of horses is working behind the scenes with them. Back with the people that really matter. The jockeys, the exercise riders, the guys who clean the stalls. Everybody who puts on the saddles, who sits there. It's another world. And I lived in it for a while, and I miss it sometimes. But anyway, that's coming up. Okay, secondly, baseball season has started. And you know where my allegiance lies. Well, I grew up right next to Wrigley Field. So the Cubs are off to an awful start. 5-9. They got snowed out today in Chicago. And they lost a game yesterday in the worst possible way. And let me tell you what I mean by that. They were rallying in the ninth. It was 6-5. Angels were winning. And they had runners on second and third. Kyle Schwarber's at bat. 3-2 count. The guy's trying to bust his butt against the reliever. Left-handed hitter. And they love to throw the ball down low and then get you to check swing. And it's a hard pitch to hold on to. To hold up on and tell you. When I was batting, let me tell you it is, because you really have to protect yourself. You don't want to strike out and a fastball at the knees or even a curveball at the knees. So Kyle does that kind of check swing, but it was a check swing, and they always look to the third base umpire because he's left-handed. Was it a check swing? And they called him out. And he was about ready to kill that umpire. He ran down the line. I was about ready to do it too. And if you look at that, there's no reason that poor guy should have been called out. But life is not fair in baseball and in life. But you can be assured, folks, and I say this every year, World War III will not break out until baseball season is over. There's too much money involved in it now. So even if my Cubs aren't going to win this year, which right now I'm about 75% on their side, 25% no, because I don't like what they did in the offseason. No relief pitching help. However, you never know. I remember one of the best stories in baseball was years ago, the Oakland Athletics it was coming down to May? And they were almost in last place, and they put together a 21 win streak. Catapulted them into the playoffs, so you never know. And so I'm still saying this. I'll go on the record. Cubs will end up in first place in the Central Division. Okay, that's the second thing. What's the third most important thing? Before we get into how Islam and the Vatican are destroying our world. The third most important thing is to always remember this. Never forget those first two things I talked about. And give yourself a little bit of enjoyment in life, even despite the fact the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Okay, adapt it. Remember years ago I did a story, I love this book. It's written by Dr. Peter Hammond. And it's getting old now and not updated. And it goes on statistics that are given by the government, so I don't believe all of them. For example, people say there's only 0.8 or 1% Muslim population in America. Don't worry about it. They're all friendly. But do we really know that? No. We don't know. We let everybody in here. There's 20, 30, 40 million people here that we don't know who they are, where they came from. And so how can you make that statistic? No. And Do you think they're going to tell you? No, they're hiding in some bungalow in New York, working somewhere, and God help them if they are. But, in between the cracks there's a lot of shit that can go on, and we know that. So let's look at what Hammond, and I find this interesting, because over the years, and I remember that when this book came out, I thought it would be picked up by everybody, but the mainstream, of course, didn't want to talk about it. And even the internet is really sparse on any really good studies. And you would think a good journalist would pick up on this, but there's a lot of them, but none of them make any money if they go this route. So listen to what I'm telling you. Now, this guy, Dr. Hammond, decided to look at this from a point of view of slavery, terrorism, Islam, and I add the Vatican, because he didn't get into this in his book about many reasons that people should start thinking about, where did this religion of Islam come from? Many people don't really understand anything about where their religions come from. I've had arguments, I've had discussions with Mormons, and there's about 2 or 3 of them that I talked to that really talked about how the Jesuits were also involved in creating Mormonism. Now, people will look at you and go, "Whoa, you're really off your rocker. You're the same person that thinks the world is flat." Yes. Doesn't mean I'm off my rocker. I said, I think it should be discussed. And so should the idea, who created Mormonism. And when you start looking at it, there's a lot of facts that at least should have that put on the table. And it's interesting that in both the Book of Mormonism and the Book of Islam, after you kill heretics, or in the case of being a good human being and going on all these, whatever they do when they go around doing good things, they get rewarded by angels or, women in heaven, virgins in heaven. So it's quite interesting. But we'll leave it at that for experts to really look at that. So, Peter Hammond's book got little attention, only to those who believe in conspiracy theorists, because those conspiracy theorists are really the only ones that really find out what the truth is, because then they realize that the conspiracy really was true. So Islam, folks, what is it? Most people just say, oh, it's a book, it's a religion, it's just like Catholicism. Well, there's a lot of similarities to the Book of Islam and the Vatican catechisms and all their traditions. But Islam really is more than just a religion. It's not a cult, in a sense. If it is, it's huge. We can call it a cult. But in its fullest form, it's a total 100% system of life. Islam has religious connotations, legal connotations, political connotations, economic connotations, social and military components. Sounds similar to Catholicism, doesn't it? And I believe, and so does Peter Hammond, because I've said it many times, that the religious component of Islam is just a cover for all of its other components, just as the religious component of the Vatican is a cover for all of its other components, legal, political, economic, etc. So right off the bat, there's a lot of similarities there, right? Now, how does the word Islamization, I didn't say it right, Islamization, how does it begin? Where are there sufficient Muslims? When? It begins where and when there are sufficient Muslims in a country to agitate for their religious privileges. Now let's backtrack a little bit. And I'm going to show you the similarities very quickly here between Islam and the Vatican. And many of you, like me, weren't around when this country was formed. But if we read between the lines and we really look for the books to tell us what was going on, in the beginning there were very few Catholics in this country. And as their numbers grew, what happened? They expected more religious privileges. They agitated for those religious privileges, to the point now where there's thousands, millions of Catholic sympathizers or Catholics in this country that get great favors that others don't. And in a sense, behind the scenes, they are politically controlling, economically controlling what they could never do if they did not have a religious front. And I believe that Islam, created by that very organization in the 600s and 700s, does the same thing today. Now, when it seems politically correct, tolerant, and culturally diverse, societies agree to Muslim demands for their religious privileges, right? Some of the other components tend to creep in as well. What I mean by that is when, everybody today is very concerned about what is 0.8% of our population and offending them, when how many times are Christians offended in their own country? And there's millions of them? Give me a break. How many times have we done stories regarding how many Christians, really Bible-believing Christians, not Catholic people or Catholic Christians, when they're not even Christians. I'm using that word very loosely. How many times have these people been even tortured, politically not allowed to speak in their own country? That's here. I'm not even talking about China. But we're supposed to be so worried about 0.8 of our population. They can do what they want in this country. They can go to a mosque. They can worship what they want. But is that all they want? No. And you can believe it, because that's what has happened in other countries. And as Dr. Hammond pointed out, he said as long as Muslims, the population remains around under 2% in any given country, they will be, for the most part, regarded as peace-loving, minority, peace-loving, and not as a threat to other countries or their citizens. That's really, for years, wasn't that the way it was? For years, I remember when I lived in Detroit, I went down to Hamtramck and all these different areas. I didn't see Muslims creating their own population there. There were Muslims that lived in this country peacefully. Now you go to a certain neighborhood in Detroit, and it's death to America there. Something's changing, right? But listen, this is just a trick, folks. This idea that Islam is a peaceful religion is wrong. Just read the Quran. Now, according to statistics, the population of the United States, the Muslims here are 0.6%. But like I said, I don't believe that, because we don't know how many people are here. We got 40 million, could be 40 million, could be 20, could be 15. We don't know who they are. Now, statistics say in Australia, Muslims are 1.5%. But do we really know how many are there? How about Canada? They're almost at 2%. China, 1.8. Okay, and Italy, they say 1.5. And it's got to be more, according to my friend there. I mean, and there's places in Italy where you can't go anymore because of their no Muslim zones or whatever they've created. In Norway, they say 1.8. But I think these statistics are on the low side. But as Hammond looked at this, basically on statistics given out, he saw differences in the way people act. and how these people act. So he said, once they're about 2 to 5%, that means there's more Muslims talking. Now think about this. We got this Muslim representative in Congress. And the reason I use that is because she wants to be determined. That's the way she identifies herself. Not as an American. Now, what am I going to do? Let's say I got nominated to Congress. I'm in Congress. What am I going to do? Am I going to wear a Polish hat and go, I'm a Polish congressman? No, I'm an American. But she's very quick to point to her identity before realizing she's an American congresswoman, not a Muslim congresswoman. So we look at countries that have a population of 2 to 5% of Muslims, right? And Dr. Hammond in his book showed that when they have more people on their side, they begin to proselytize from other ethnic minorities and disaffected groups, often with major recruiting from the jails and among street gangs. And this is happening as we speak in countries like Denmark, Germany, the United Kingdom, Spain, Thailand, and others, where the reported numbers of Muslims are from 2 to 5%. And if we went through each of those countries and pinpointed exactly what's happening there, which we've done in this show, we've at least talked about Denmark, Germany, and the United Kingdom. We haven't talked about Spain. We found that in those countries, there's areas where Muslims populate that white people or Westerners aren't allowed into. Even the police don't go there. They don't subscribe to the laws of the country. And if you go there as a woman or a man, you're harassed. So what has happened? Exactly what Dr. Hammond is talking about. So let's move forward. We're at 2 to 5% in Denmark, Germany, United Kingdom, Spain, Thailand. What about 5% and higher? He found out that when he looked at these countries, Muslims exercise an inordinate influence in the proportion to their percentage of the population. For example, they will push for introduction of halal, clean by Islamic standards, food, thereby securing food preparation jobs for Muslims. They will increase pressure on supermarket chains to feature halal, or whatever they call their food, halal, on their shelves, along with threats for failure to comply. Hey, look, you can go to a Chinese store, you can go anywhere. Why do you need, you can set up your own shop. No one in America tells you can't do that. But this is going on. This harassment of Western standards for a purpose. Now, at this point, they'll look to get the ruling of the government to allow them to rule themselves within their own ghettos, like I talked about, under Sharia Islamic law. Now, they have gone to different European countries, and they've gotten an edict from these countries that they can have, the police can't go in, they can rule themselves by Sharia law. Now, what are these people talking about? These government authorities in places like Denmark, Germany, and other places. Well, ask Rome. They'll tell you. The ultimate goal, and let's move to the chase here. The ultimate goal of Islam, I don't care, of Omar and Congress and the rest of them, is to establish Sharia law over the entire world. And you don't believe me? That's what they do. Now, I don't have time, but I'm only up to 5%. What happens in a country when Muslims approach 10% of the population? It's interesting. But if you look at these countries, there's an increase in lawlessness as a means of complaint about their conditions. Now, they begin to take things in their own hands, saying, listen, our conditions are terrible. We are being oppressed. And they begin to increase lawlessness based on their numbers. And we're going to explain where that's happening. How about Paris, France? How about, you want to ever know the number of car bombings and burnings going on there? We'll get into that tomorrow. I don't have time today. But come back, because we're going to go all the way to what happens when a country is 100% Muslim. Then you're going to see the real tragedy, and all you transgenders and homosexuals out there, go live in Iran or one of these countries. They'll throw you off a bridge. They'll throw you from a 4-story apartment. And then talk about your rights. So don't start being sympathetic to Miss Omar here in Congress. Because if she had her way, she'd throw every homosexual and transgender right off the top of the Capitol building. And if we allow this to happen, that will happen one day. Back tomorrow on your favorite show, The Investigative Journal. See you tomorrow.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.